I just took my first sip of coffee of the day. So
the day.
just give you hello.
Wow. Late starter this morning.
I had to get up and get ready. I have to be beautiful for the podcast, Brian. It takes a long time to put this package together.
Yeah, I can believe that.
You have a face for radio, I take it.
He does indeed. Yeah.
Hey.
There's a room full of faces for radio.
This is the AT Banter podcast, a balanced and entertaining look at assistive technology, accessibility, and its importance in people's lives. Join Rob Minot, Ryan Fleury, and Steve Barclay as they banter with people around the world about anything and everything regarding assistive technology and the disability community. Now, on with the show.
Hey, and welcome to another episode of AT Banter.
Banter.
My name is Rob Minot. Today, joining me as usual, Mr. Ryan Fleury.
I'm Ryan Fleury.
And Mr. Steve Barclay.
And apparently I am Mr. Steve Barclay.
And Mr. Cowbell. Whoa. That was not
good.
a solid,
That was a ricochet.
That was great. he struck it once and got 2 dongs out of
He
it.
would not be able to do that again if he tried.
Nope.
Nope. How are we today? How was your weekend?
Mine was okay.
That's it?
Yeah.
Yeah, Steve?
Yeah.
Mine was excellent. Got the dog out for a walk around Burnaby Lake. Took the dog in for a bath after the walk around Burnaby Lake because that was a muddy dog. And what else did we do? Oh, we saw Captain Marvel.
Oh, yeah, and you enjoyed it?
Fabulous, yeah.
Yeah?
Probably the best Marvel movie I've seen.
Really?
What?
I would
really?
say so. Yeah.
Really? And
Yep.
you've seen them all, I'm assuming?
Yep.
Really?
So far.
It's better than Infinity War?
I think so. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is high praise. Well, I haven't actually seen it yet, but I probably this week I'll get out to see it. Man, wow, I'm excited. Yeah, I don't know. I had a bummer of a weekend.
What?
I watched that Leaving Neverland.
Oh, did you? I
did
want to
you?
see that. One of the big things I've been, hearing on the radios, radio stations are starting to, stop playing Michael Jackson music because of that documentary, and that just kind of infuriated me. The guy was brilliant.
Well, yeah, I guess what bummed me out about it, and not to get too far in the weeds, but we might as well talk about it. I think the emphasis is going to fall in all the wrong places. I watched the documentary. I watched the Oprah special that aired after the documentary, and it's a 4-hour documentary. Wow. It goes into a lot of detail, and it's all about these two guys. And really, it's an examination of what abuse looks like and how it plays out throughout somebody's life. And I feel like that conversation and that fact gets lost in this argument of the people who are in the Michael Jackson camp and are saying, this is just a money grab. Right. It's all fake. And the camp of people who believe these guys. And it's just going to be an online argument of these two tribes fighting it out. And then in a couple of weeks, people will forget about it. And it's just going to, and that's the shame. I mean, because it could have really been an important conversation about abuse. And, no matter where you fall on that spectrum of, if you're a Michael, and I understand, like if you're a lifelong Michael Jackson fan, this is going to be hard for you to reconcile. Because I can't see anyone with an open mind who watches this documentary and really looks at things from an outside point of view. It's pretty hard to really say that this didn't happen.
Right.
And I dare anybody to watch this documentary and tell me that these two guys did not suffer abuse. I mean, this one guy, every one of his interviews, the guy looks tortured. Like he's suffering. And, you know, the documentary doesn't end on a happy note. It's not like it ends with, and now these two guys are doing great.
Right.
No, they're still suffering through it. And, you know, the real, you know, surprising thing about it is that for the longest time, they didn't even think of it as abuse. It's not like they were unwilling parties to all of it. You know, as kids, I mean, they weren't able to process it. And so it's just, I don't know. It's just, it's a really intense bummer of a ride, but I think it's an important one to watch for sure. And, you know, and in terms of, you know, whether or not Michael Jackson music should be banned, I mean, I don't necessarily think that either. I don't know what the answer is there. I think it's an individual choice. I mean, you have to take in the facts and you have to make your own decisions on whether or not you're going to want to listen to Michael Jackson music, whether that's going to affect your enjoyment of the music. I don't know that it should be banned. I don't know if radio stations necessarily need to stop playing it. It's, you know, it's an individual choice, but I don't know.
It's that whole argument of does, you know, the artist doing something horrible invalidate their art? Yeah. You know, and it's something that's come up a bunch of times in the last while because of things like the Me Too movement. Yeah. And we're finding out, you know, hey, you know, a lot of these people who we worshipped as cultural icons, they were actually dicks.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
You know, Bill Cosby. You know,
oh yeah, sure. That's another good
Bill Cosby
example.
was roofing women left, right, and center, and you know, sexually abusing them, and he was a terrific comedian.
God, yeah.
You know, he was a really terrific comedian. He was, you know, I remember as a kid laughing my ass off to Bill Cosby stuff. You know, should all of his stuff be banned because he was, you know, in real life a jackass?
Yeah.
You know, that's tough. You know, if we invalidate the art because the artist is a jerk, where do we stop? You know, what if we find out Picasso was an asshole? You know.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, I don't feel like I have a right to tell anybody else what they can get enjoyment out of. If they want to listen to Beat It and still love it and dance around to it, who am I to tell them that they shouldn't be able to do that just because of Michael Jackson's personal life?
Michael Jackson was a jerk, you know.
Anyways, we went way off into the weeds on that. Yep. Nothing to do with anything. But anyways, that was my movie. So I watched that, and it puts you in a weird mood because it's like it's 4 hours and it's pretty intense.
I could sit through that.
All right. Well, now that we've done that, you guys want to do some news?
News.
Positively, Steve.
Delta Airlines bans young puppies and kittens as support animals.
What?
Yes, great idea.
Yeah.
Where did you see this story?
It's on CNN. Delta will ban service and emotional support animals under 4 months of age from all their flights beginning December 18th. The airline also announced Monday that they are prohibiting emotional support animals on flights that are over 8 hours long. The changes appear to be partly intended to address animals relieving themselves on airplanes. According to the airline...
It's okay for people to do it.
Yes, no, it's not. According to the airline, incidents involving service and support animals, including urination, defecation, and biting, increased 84% from 2016 to 2017.
Which kind of leads me to a discussion on were these actual certified support animals?
At 4 months? Absolutely not. They're not.
Exactly.
There's no frickin' way.
Exactly.
A 4-month-old puppy is an trained emotional support.
Exactly.
animal.
Trained. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not at all.
Yeah, I don't see this as being much of a big deal. I mean, you know, again, I'm not too far. You know, I don't know a lot of the details in terms of who this affects. But I mean, under 4, like who has a support animal that's under 4 months old?
But that's been a huge fiasco over the last couple of years, is people taking any animal on, claiming it's a support animal and faking certifications. Yeah. You know, this is a big deal.
This is my emotional support peacock.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Well, you know, and a lot of it is to probably knowing people, you know, it's to avoid the $125 charge that they would normally get in having their animal fly with them.
Yeah.
If they say it's a support animal, of course it flies for free. So I don't see this as being unreasonable on behalf of the airlines. I mean, it really would only affect a small portion. I mean, maybe the bigger deal about it is the ban on having a support animal that's on a flight longer than 8 hours. But that could be a problem for some people. Like if you want to fly to, I don't know, Europe, like what's that flight? Like what's the longest flight you've been on, Steve?
Probably the flight to Australia.
And so what's that? Is that more than 8 hours?
Yeah.
Yeah. So for example, if someone wanted to fly to Australia with their guide dog, what do?
You're not going to have a 4-month-old guide dog.
No, but the ban is also on any support animal.
Any support.
On a flight over 8 hours.
Any emotional support animal.
Okay, so see, a guide dog's not an emotional support animal.
No, we'll ban service and emotional support animals.
Then I disagree with Delta's policy.
Now,
Yeah.
that might, but that would only, I'm assuming that would only affect you if you had a direct flight. If you had like a one-stop flight from here to say Australia that was
12
13
hours or something, yeah.
So you would have to actually just split it up. You'd have to,
Fly to Tokyo first.
I guess, but honestly, that might be an issue because a direct flight is going to be a lot easier for somebody who's, say, visually impaired and has a service animal than, any sort of a stopover.
Yep.
But I don't know. But what do you do with a service animal, say, that's
Well,
on a 13-hour flight? Where do they go to the bathroom? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, well, obviously
they don't.
Yeah, they can't. Right? There's nowhere for them to go unless you took a training pad or something and had them relieve themselves on a training pad. That would be about all you could do, I think.
But I mean, that's a long flight for a service animal to not.
It is, yeah.
So it's kind of even not fair to the service animal. So I don't know. Maybe it's not an unreasonable policy. Well, Ryan, you said you disagreed. Like, what do you think?
Well, we've had reputable, recognized service guide dog schools for decades, and I think this kind of doesn't penalize them, but kind of puts them in a really difficult situation because we have people from around the world coming to these guide dog schools to get their trained certified dogs, and now they could be turned away at the airport because their flight's over 8 hours with their
told
service
they
dog,
have to crate their service dog,
or change their flight patterns.
Right.
That to me, that's just creating a nightmare.
But so is as you see it, is that the problem? Like, so if they came out and you knew that when you booked your flight, like if they told you, if you went to, like, Ryan wants to take a service animal to Australia, and they were like, okay, well, look, we can't book you on a direct flight because of this, and everything was up front, so it didn't create any hassle, would you be okay with it?
Yeah, I think you make your arrangements and you go in with your eyes wide open, but I think there's going to be a lot of pushback on this. I don't have an issue with the emotional support animals because I think that's just gotten way out of control. But the reputable service dog schools, around the world, I think there's going to be pushback on this.
Yeah, I think there needs to be, because I think this policy is being made because of people abusing the system, and they need to deal with the abuse, not the legitimate service animals.
Well, they say that the number of service animals on Delta flights have increased nearly 150% since 2015.
Yeah.
So it does make you wonder, it's like, well, why? What's with that bump? And it's probably because of the people who are trying to, work the system.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, the criteria for saying that something's a service animal these days seems to be saying that something's a service animal. It's like, this is my emotional support tortoise. The airlines don't have the balls to say, typically, sorry, what now?
Well, and they
get
don't
that
even
reptile into the hold.
Well, and if you're checking into your flight, they don't even have the time to pick up the phone and call, let's say, a service animal school to say, is this a graduate of your class? Is this a certified animal?
Well,
you can print off a certificate on the internet right now.
No, well, not anymore, because as of March, they've started asking all the passengers to show proof 48 hours before flying, so that they have to show proof that it's in good health, it's been vaccinated. The passenger has to sign a release form saying that the animal would behave, and to produce a letter that's signed by a doctor or a licensed mental health professional certifying that it's either a comfort pet or a service animal. So they're definitely cracking down on people trying to work the system, from the sounds of it.
Bonus.
So, but no, I guess, yeah, it should be interesting to see what kind of pushback.
Well, I'm glad they're cracking down on it. Don't get me wrong. I just, I think it's going to take some time and some figuring out.
Yeah, it's that policy of over 8 hours that makes it. I think that's the one that is a little questionable. I mean, I can see the airline's point of view, but at the same time, I don't know.
And before we get letters, yes, I recognize that a turtle is an amphibian and not a reptile.
Yes, because that's what people will take away from that conversation. Okay, so this story is about the state of accessibility in the TTC, which is the Toronto
Transit Commission.
Yeah. Which is a little shocking to me, given that, Ontario has had the ADA since 2005?
AODA.
Oh, I'm sorry, the AODA. Yeah. They're supposed to be, making the province completely accessible, and their deadline is 2025. And this article is written from the viewpoint of a young lady who has, I believe it's cerebral palsy, and uses 2 canes to get around. And it discusses sort of the state of accessibility within the transit system. And it's a shockingly not great.
Well, it's going to be accessible by 2025.
You think so? I mean, so
Not if they run out of money, it won't.
Listen, I mean, they where is that? The act was passed in the act was passed in 2005, but to date, only 45 of Toronto's 75 subway stations are actually accessible. So what's that been? 13 years? And they're less than halfway, or they're just over halfway?
They got another 6 years to go. There's plenty of time.
I would disagree with that.
What's the issue here?
Accessibility.
Are you playing devil's advocate?
I mean, they're gonna be accessible by 2025. Come on, it's only 20 years after the act was passed. These things don't change overnight. They got to build elevators, for goodness sake.
That's what they're saying. Yeah, and sometimes not just one.
This is a frustrating part about this legislation, and I feel like we're poised to make the same mistake with the national legislation, in the fact that this is gonna come out. It's all about optics. It's all about making people feel good, to make it look like you're doing something, but you're creating legislation that has no teeth, that has no enforcement, and people aren't taking it seriously. And I'm sorry, this does not look like Ontario is taking this seriously, or at least the TTC is taking it seriously, because 13 years and you've just over half of the stations are accessible. Not acceptable. Like, that's just, it's not acceptable, especially when all you have to do to make them accessible is build a friggin' elevator.
And how much does that cost?
I don't know.
Well,
I don't know
the
how much
article
it costs,
says about like $7 million or something.
Yeah, so
you're right.
There's money involved here.
Yeah.
They've got a plan. They've got to budget out. They can't just say instantaneously overnight we're going to put in elevators in every station, because they don't have the money to do that.
Well, and the article says too, they can't close down stations because people have to get around, right? They can't shut down the system.
Yeah.
The one thing I took away from this article, and it just kind of bothered me, and I'm looking forward to our guest we have coming on in April, who's actually mentioned in this article as well, Mr. David Lepofsky, is he talked about they fought to get audible announcements on SkyTrain buses and streetcars.
Or sorry, the TTC, you mean? Or you're talking about the subway system in
Toronto.
In Toronto,
Yeah.
okay, yeah. I don't know. They're not called the SkyTrain. I don't know what the hell they call it.
Well, yeah, it's the subway system, the streetcars, and buses.
Ugh.
They fought to get audible announcements. Why are we still having this discussion?
Yeah, exactly.
It should be implemented at the beginning. Just put it in.
Well, and the thing that boggles my mind is that this is in a province that passed legislation.
Yeah.
Accessibility legislation.
If you set a deadline of 2025 for when things have to get done, you can be guaranteed that in 2024, they are going to be scrambling and complaining about a short deadline.
Yeah.
I guarantee it.
You're so right. And it's just, I guess that's human nature. But still, it's not acceptable, and it's frustrating as hell to read an article like this, because I had no idea. I mean, I thought that because of this legislation, they were ahead of the game, but clearly not.
Well, they are, because by the time we get the legislation in, the deadline for us to be accessible will be 2045. And in 2044,
things are going to pick up, everybody. Just hang in there.
Yeah.
Hang in there for another 20 years. I don't know, but I read articles like this, and I fear for the new legislation. So yeah, Ryan, it will be interesting to get them on. And
yeah, well, there's two sides of that camp, right? There's some that are saying that a lot of amendments need to be put back into this Canadians with Disabilities Act before it even passes, because you listen to one side of the argument and they're saying, well, it has teeth, there's fines if people don't follow them, and blah 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 blah. But then you got the others, on the David Lepofsky side, and others who are saying, well, no, let's put this in now. Let's get these amendments back into this act so that we don't have to fight this after the fact. There's no point in passing a bill that has no teeth.
Yeah.
Right? It gives nobody an incentive to incorporate accessibility into anything. So let's do it right now. So it's going to be an interesting discussion.
Absolutely. Well, and the scary part about this is that we're talking about the TTC. We're talking about the transit system that should be the most accessible thing out there
in our country.
Because this is something that people with impairments need to use on a daily basis.
Yep. Yeah. It's the busiest transit system in the world, right? Or in Canada. And yes, you're right. It is ridiculous that it's not accessible to everyone.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll be we're watching you, Toronto.
We won't have a Ford in office in Toronto, in Ontario. The Fords will be gone.
We'll see.
Maybe.
There's no set term limit on Premier, right?
Premier for life.
Yeah. They love that guy.
Oh, dear. Trump light. Hey, Steve, why don't you tell the fine folks about Canadian Assistive Technology?
Well, Canadian Assistive Technology is a Canadian-based distributor of, guess what? Assistive technology.
I would not have guessed that.
Really? Oh, I got to work something better into the name then. And we do all kinds of low vision and blindness aids, as well as all kinds of physical access aids and accessible furniture. You name it. Visit our website at www.canastech.com.
Rick, let me ask you about this. Chaos Technical Services.
Chaos Technical Services.
Don't sound so excited about it. Woo! Speaking of repairs.
We are the sister company to Canastech. We do the repairs on low vision devices, reading machines, for libraries, braille printers, and pretty well anything in between. We can be found at www.chaostechnicalservices.com.
Joining us now is Richard Harlow, blindness advocate and artist. Good morning, Richard.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
I can hear you just fine. Yep.
Awesome.
Well, listen, we want to thank you so much for taking some time out of this Monday morning to talk to us.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure.
So, geez, where to start? You are a man of many talents, it seems.
I guess a modern Renaissance man.
Clearly. But why don't we step back now? You lost your vision fairly late in life. Can you tell us a little bit about what that was like and how it all happened?
Sure. Well, in 2009, my vision in my right eye started going a bit blurry. And at the time, I was going to Emily Carr University, pretty prestigious art school on the West Coast. And by about Thanksgiving that year, I lost most of my central vision in my right eye. And doctors were thinking that it was just stress. It wasn't just stress. It actually was a super rare optic nerve disease called LHON, Leber's hereditary optic neuropathy. And it took about 6 months to go from having perfect 20/20 vision and getting straight A's in my arts classes to now being legally blind and having to use a white cane to get around. By around spring, I lost a significant amount of my vision in my left eye as well, and had to actually leave art school for medical reasons because I was going through MS treatment because they thought it could have potentially been MS at the time. And because I was willing to take anything to be able to fix my visual acuity and make it go back to normal. They gave me a dosage of steroid treatment and chemotherapy at the time, as well as going through pretty much every test and going through the ringer to try and figure out what was actually going wrong with me. And it took a specialist in Vancouver to be able to figure it out. He was almost retired at the time. And so he had seen my disease before. And once he was able to kind of like figure it out, what was going wrong with me, it felt a lot better. It felt like I was validated for my condition and validated for what was actually going wrong, as opposed to a couple doctors thinking that it was just stress just because they couldn't figure it out. And so I had to drop out of art school, and I went back to school for psychology, and then to go back to just a couple of years ago, I took up visual arts again, and now I'm a professional artist.
Yeah, LHON, it's interesting. We talked to Maria Johnson, who runs a blog. I think she's in California somewhere, who had the same, similar experience, except she lost her vision in her 40s. And she's a really big LHON advocate, trying to spread the word about the disease because it can be so rare that a lot of practitioners and stuff aren't able to pick up on it.
Exactly.
And that must be really frustrating as somebody who, you're going through this, and your doctors literally can't find a reason for why it's happening.
It's like trying to solve a murder mystery and not having any idea how it's happened, but it happened. And it was probably the worst part of the whole thing, was not actually knowing why. It was really scary, and there were times that I didn't know how I was going to get through this, or if I was going to lose all my vision completely. And that's the other thing with LHO, and there's such a huge scale of what can happen. You can have spontaneous recovery, you can have a bit of damage and lose a significant portion of your vision, or you can go completely blind. And that's just how it is. And of course it has no cure either, so that's stressful in itself. It's nice that there's other people out there trying to spread the word about LHON, because it affects about 300 million people according to the last checked statistics. And yeah, that's exactly why optometrists wouldn't exactly figure it out as easily, because it's so rare.
And the process of that is different. I mean, for every person that goes through vision loss, it's a very different experience, I'm sure. And, especially depending on, there's so many different degenerative eye conditions out there.
Yeah.
In reading your story, I find that that's the really important takeaway. And the thing that I really would like to talk to you about is that process, because I feel like for other people who are going through vision loss, it's so important to hear stories like yours, that they can sort of latch onto and realize that there's life after vision loss. There's hope.
One of the things that I like to tell people is sometimes with getting a disability later on in life, no matter what that disability is, at the moment, it feels like it's the end. It feels like you're not going to get through it potentially. There's a lot of unknowns, but going blind, I feel like it wasn't the end necessarily. It was just like the beginning of a new chapter, and it took me quite some time to actually wrap my head around that. But it actually made me a better person, probably. At the time, I had a job lined up to work at a video game company. I'm doing a whole lot more rewarding work now as a disability rights activist, as an artist, as a motivational speaker and all this, than working at a video game company,
right?
And now there's stories coming out at video game companies how the working conditions are absolutely horrible. So
yeah. It doesn't sound like it's a great industry to be in at the moment.
Yeah.
But it's but the other thing that's interesting about your story is that and that makes it must have made it so much harder, is that you were in the middle of going to art school, and here you are, you're diagnosed with this degenerative eye condition. I mean, that must have been a huge blow and really hard to come back from.
It was. I will admit, I had a bit of depression at the time, and it was probably one of the most difficult things in my life at the time, because of the chemotherapy, because of the steroid treatment that made me rather irritable. I mean, that happens to everyone. And then on top of that, the unknown.
Yeah.
I picked up a white cane fairly quickly, though, and wanted to learn how to adapt, because I wanted to be able to still live my life as best as I could. When it was happening, I was about 20 years old. And so I wanted to be able to live my life as I chose. At the time, I had doctors and some people saying what I could and could not do. And I didn't pick up a paintbrush or do art for about 6 years after I lost my sight. The first time I picked up a paintbrush was about a year after, and I can remember just crying because I was comparing my art to what I used to be capable of. And the thing that really helped me also be able to actually do art again was studying art history. So back, studying all the greats. Right before I lost all my sight, I traveled through Europe with one of my best friends from Germany. And that experience really was an amazing experience, being able to see the world before I wasn't really able to see it as clearly, and see all the paintings that I studied in my textbooks. And I think that was a really rewarding experience, because it's what helped me grasp my new idea of my art. Every artist has gone through a period in their life where they change their style, change their technique, change things up. And instead of thinking of what I used to be able to do and comparing my current work with my old work, and having that as like the standard, I had to change my thought and viewpoint to, this is my new style. This is a new unique thing that I'm trying to accomplish. And I shouldn't compare myself to what I used to be able to do. Something that happens to a lot of artists is they compare themselves to another artist, but no other artist has the same experience as that person. So that was also something that was really helpful.
So during that 6 years, did you just think you would never return to painting, or was it something that you thought, well, I might return to it when I'm ready?
I honestly never thought I would do painting again or arts, but the thing was, like, I had it in my head, like from a doctor saying that I wasn't going to be able to do art again. And so that was something that was validated in my own head, that I didn't necessarily challenge that viewpoint.
I wish they wouldn't say things like that.
Yeah, because it's like it puts you into a little box, and you're now a glass doll that is blind, and you can't do anything because someone has told you that you can't leave this box. It's very limiting. It's the same sort of thing like in the States. I saw a statistic around 90% of blind students don't do PE, don't do physical education.
Yeah.
Like, you're just taking something away from that community. And so when someone tells you, oh, you're never going to be able to do art again, well, F that.
Yeah.
Shortly after I lost my sight, I started kind of questioning what I could and could not do. And so I found that I'm able to do like rowing. I've been able to do outrigger paddling. I've been able to do Brazilian jiu-jitsu for 5 years. I know how to kick butt. I've been able to do modeling, stand-up comedy. I've hosted live shows. I've done public speaking and presentations to large communities of people to talk about disability and the arts and vision loss. I've been able to travel. Like, I challenge myself of what I'm capable of doing, because I don't want to be limited to what anyone thinks that blind people are capable of doing. And for me, it's kind of rewarding when people say you don't look blind, because that means that you're challenging that stereotype.
Right.
And changing people's perceptions of what blind people are capable of.
Talk to us a little bit about what kind of support you had in those in those early years. Were you a client of the CNIB at all? Like, did you get O&M training, or did you kind of navigate that stuff yourself?
The CNIB was probably the biggest help at the time. I had a mentor that really coached me through a bit of my depression and anxiety and such that I had when I was going blind. And then I also got some white cane training and I guess rehabilitation training, in the sense of being able to cook and navigate my apartment and do normal things. So that was very, very helpful. And the CNIB has been a great organization for me to be a client with, but also to volunteer with. So I've now been giving back to the community that I'm a part of as a mentor, as an ambassador, and I'm on their BC and Yukon division board.
So I'm kind of fascinated with the process that you went through, and I think it's an important message, like I said, for other people who may be listening to this that may be going through something similar, did it sort of hit you all at once where you're just like, you know what, F everything that people are telling me about what I can or can't do. I'm just going to try everything. Or was it more of a gradual process where you were like, well, I'm going to try this. And then that kind of worked. And then you thought, well, you know what, I'm going to try stand-up comedy. And then, I'm going to get back into painting. Like
it was definitely a gradual process. Like I had never done like skiing, for instance, in my life. And I had a friend of mine say like, oh, that would be kind of dangerous. But then I was like, well, how dangerous would it be? You know, like what's the worst that could happen? I guess death, but realistically, what's the worst that could happen? Maybe I fall on my butt a few times and eat snow. Not that big of a deal. And so I went out like downhill skiing and cross country skiing with a university like trip through the outdoor rec program. And that was a pretty awesome experience because then I was able to go with a friend and be supported by the other people. And that was a really rewarding experience. It was a gradual process of me questioning, all right, so I've been told that blind people aren't able to do this thing. Okay, so that. How can I do it?
Right. Now talk to us a little bit about the painting, because and how your style changed, and like sort of what style were you sort of before you started to lose your vision, and what style were you after? So
previously, I guess I had a bit of a more impressionistic eye, a lot of realism. I was able to do paintings that were semi-realistic, very, very true to life. Being able to paint like the human figure, perfect skin tones, perfect, proportions and everything. And so now my artwork is influenced a lot by my activism. I like to say like my activism fuels my art and my art fuels my activism. And I say that because I used universal design principles that I've studied to help people with low vision. So like high contrast colors,
right.
Things like tactile qualities that I invoke in the canvas as well. So I've kind of taken bits of my community, so the high contrast kind of color combinations, and using tactile principles. Like when I'm trying to use my stove, I have bumps on certain numbers. Well, I kind of like transferred the idea of using tactile sensation on the paintings to then do a tactile painting that invokes different sensations.
Okay.
There are different textbooks out there that have diagrams for the blind that have like embossed diagrams, for instance.
Sure.
And there are also books out there for autistic children where the books themselves invoke different textures on each page that they can feel. And I guess I'm using a combination of the two in my paintings. So for instance, if I'm doing like a landscape image and there's a lot of sand on the beach or something, I make that sand actually feel like gritty when you run your hands over it. And say if I'm using like water in the image, then I can make it really smooth and make it so you can feel ripples in the water or bubbles or waves. Being able to build up vegetation to actually make the trees feel like actual like foliage and such. So I'm trying to invoke different textures in the painting. This is a reaction to actually the art world and current curatorial practices. The issue that I also had when I was going to art gallery shows shortly after I lost my sight was that the art gallery scene is actually one with massive barriers for a lot of people with disabilities. And I was able to identify those barriers from my universal design principles that I was able to study. So usually paintings are supposed to be hung at a standard eye height for the average person. And if you're in a wheelchair, or if you're a child or somebody like with dwarfism, eye height is a lot smaller for you.
Right.
And so I've noticed in some galleries where they have like a sculpture high up on a pedestal. And if someone was in a wheelchair sitting down or, anything like that, they wouldn't be able to see that sculpture to its full degree. And so I require galleries to always lower my paintings to a better like sitting height, right, or a height where a child could actually touch the painting, because I'm challenging the viewpoint that paintings are not supposed to be touched in the gallery scene, and I actually encourage people to touch the painting. It has another benefit for someone to be able to touch it is it invokes a more vivid memory when they think back to that painting, because you're using multiple senses when you're interacting with that painting versus just looking at it and then walking to the next painting. You're actually taking the time to feel it. And then you have a more, I guess, intimate conversation with the painting when you're doing that versus just staring at it and going to the next one.
And that's a perfect metaphor for universal design in general, because it's you're talking about an experience that benefits, say, somebody who is visually impaired or somebody in a wheelchair, but it's also going to benefit somebody who's able-bodied as well, because it enriches that experience. It adds that tactile sensation to, the other senses that are going on.
Yeah.
It provides multisensory reinforcement.
That's right.
Exactly. And I really hate when I go to an art gallery and I am not allowed to actually be able to access the gallery to my visual needs. So when I say that, I've had security guards yell at me for standing close to a painting. And for me to be able to still experience the painting like everyone else, I need to stand closer to it.
Right.
But most galleries don't understand. When I have a white cane in my hand, they don't see that. They just see a guy who's standing close to a painting. And so when I've talked to groups of people that are blind, a lot of people don't even bother going to an art gallery because the first thing they think of, well, it wouldn't be accessible to me.
Right.
But now we actually have some galleries across Canada that are trying new things. I know at the Vancouver Art Gallery, they have a new program where blind people are able to go, I think, on a Saturday of every month. They have a schedule where they will actually guide you through the gallery space and do a guided tour for those blind people, where they can actually touch and feel certain sculptures. They have paintings described to them. And this is cultural education right there. If you're not making visual arts or the arts accessible to a large demographic, that demographic isn't going to be able to, it's so exclusionary.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's in a way like segregation to people with disabilities.
So now I have to put a plug in for Vocali, who
right.
that was done in coordination with Vocali. I sit on the board for Vocali. So shout out to Vocali and Steph Kirkland, our executive director, for helping make that happen.
Yes. Big props to you guys, because this is something that should just be standardized for a lot of galleries across Canada. I went to the Ontario Art Gallery, and they had no idea the amount of barriers that were in their gallery when I spoke to one of the curators after I walked through. And I think it's just a matter of being able to have these difficult conversations with people about what accessibility looks like and how it can be put into reality. Because everyone should have access to the arts. Everyone should be able to have access to different cultural events. And we should be treated like not second-class citizens in these realms.
It's so frustrating, and so many attitudes need to change at a bunch of different levels. And we're making slight progress here and there, but not only in the able-bodied community. I think able-bodied people would listen to this and go, well, it's an art gallery. Of course, it's not accessible for blind people. There's blind people can enjoy art, and they just and the trouble is that there's probably a lot of people in the visually impaired community that share that same opinion, because that's what's been drilled into their heads by
by society,
and even by their own doctors, like you said. Your own doctor told you that this was just something you were never going to be able to do. So that attitude needs to change. Like, people need to understand that they're the only barriers that are in place are the ones that people are putting in front of you.
Yeah, exactly. There are so many tools out there now that have been able to destroy all those barriers for me in different galleries. I have different apps on my phone that will read out text on the wall. When I take a picture of it, I have an app on my phone that will actually scan the painting and look up information online about that painting, including the description and the painter and when it was done and location and all those great pieces of information. I have an app on my phone that can allow me to just be able to see the painting a little bit easier through magnification. Apps are really, technology is the biggest equalizer, and it's almost getting to a point where the only barriers out there are the ones that other people put us in, but also the ones that are in our own mind.
Yeah, well, those are the worst ones. To be honest, those are the hardest ones to overcome.
Yeah.
And that's why education and advocacy are so important. So,
yeah, I've always felt that education is the biggest thing that will eliminate ableism, discrimination, and ignorance. Ignorance is not a bad thing. Ignorance just means that you're not educated on a certain topic, or you've never interacted with someone from that demographic. That sometimes happens to people where they've never interacted with a blind person in their life. Maybe they grew up in a small town and just wasn't the case.
Right.
And I have a job that I just got more recently. It's an artist in residency through University of British Columbia. And I'm actually going to be going into some of the high schools in Vancouver and teaching kids about disability and visual arts. And this is a first in Canada, actually. This has never happened before, where artists with disabilities are going into the classroom teaching kids about their field of study. So we have people that are songwriters, we have people that are actors, we have people that are multi-talented, but all these artists have disabilities. And so we're going into the classroom and we're having those frank discussions with kids, being able to help remove misconceptions that kids get at a very young age, and being able to make the classroom more inclusive for other students with disabilities in the classroom, but also help the able-bodied people understand the challenges that disabled people go through on a daily basis. And I think this might help the next generation be able to be more productive and be more inclusive in society.
Yeah, I mean, I think that those, you're absolutely right. It's the next generation that we have to put the emphasis on. I mean, both, I would say, in the able-bodied community, but also within the disability community. We have to be teaching kids that are visually impaired, physically impaired, that there is no limit to what they can do, given the right support system and the right technology. But they shouldn't be putting limiters on themselves.
Yeah. Like, I would have never thought that I would be 10 years later down the road and I'm traveling across the country with my art. That's never something that would have entered my mind 10 years ago when I was going blind.
What else are you up to advocacy-wise?
Well, one of the things that you guys got in contact me about was the accessible icon.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That
was a bit of a project that I did a few years ago to be able to change people's perceptions of what disability is and have a positive spin on it as well. So the Accessible Icon project was something that started in the United States. And it was at first a guerrilla arts project where essentially they replaced the disability icon, the stagnant image of a person in a wheelchair with a disembodied head on the back of a wheelchair.
Right.
And putting the person first. So we've changed our language around disability significantly over the years. A long time ago, we used words like cripple, retarded, things like that. And still in the United States, retarded is a clinical term that is unfortunately used in modern day circumstances. But the icon has seen quite a bit of evolution over time. The disability icon that we see today used to actually just be a wheelchair that was used mostly in hospitals and in certain areas to be able to identify where wheelchairs could be placed and could go through. Now it's more used to show accessibility, to show that the space is wheelchair accessible.
Right.
But we've changed our language around disability and how we represent disability to be a person first and disability second type of language. So I'm a person with vision impairment, person with a disability, but I'm also a person with many other attributes that make me Richard Harlow.
Right. And
so when I saw this project, I wanted to bring it up to Canada. I had some friends of mine at my university, and we started up a disability awareness club at Vancouver Island University. And there is where we kind of, we use the icon as like our club logo. And then we loved it so much that we were like, well, why don't we just try and see if we can replace it on campus everywhere? And so we started a petition. We wanted to petition the university to change the disability icon used to represent accessibility to the accessible icon. And it took off. Everyone was supportive of it. Facilities, teachers, students, international students too. We wanted to make sure that the image was still identifiable. It uses the same sort of color scheme, and it's not too different from the old icon, which was helpful. The accessible icon, to describe for your audio listeners, essentially is a person sitting in a wheelchair, but you actually see the outline of a human figure in the wheelchair itself. And the wheelchair is seen more as a tool than the main visual factor in the icon. When you see the old icon, you can tell that the main part of the icon is the wheelchair itself. You can see the arm of the wheelchair, but no arm of the person. You can see the back of the wheelchair, but no body in the wheelchair and no legs, which is problematic. And then with this new icon, you can see the person leaning forward to show movement.
Yeah.
You can see their arms like visibly looking like they're about to push the wheelchair, and you can actually see their legs.
Yeah. There's a real suggestion of motion and an active sense of the icon that you don't get from the original.
It shows that you're going places.
It sure does. They're hauling ass, let me tell you.
Yeah. And so it was adopted by the university, first in Canada. And then we thought, hey, why don't we just see if the city just starts using it? And so I started a campaign with a local organization to try and change the icon citywide. And city council absolutely loved it. So Nanaimo, little Nanaimo, became the first city in Canada to adopt the icon.
Wow.
And then I've kind of seen stories since then where other provinces have been pushing for it as well. And I actually helped mentor some young activists in Ontario to get it pushed out there, and some people in Alberta. And so now the accessible icon is pretty much a image that's getting pushed nationally in different provinces to update the disability icon from the very limiting, stigmatized icon that it is now to the accessible icon. And in BC, it's now the icon. If you get a placard, you get that image on your placard.
And it just goes to show you, it small beginnings can result in big things.
It's awesome because I've heard the feedback from people in the community. It's meant to be a more positive image, more empowering for people with disabilities. I understand that it's not an image that represents all disabilities, but it's an improvement of what we had a few years ago. And that's where I'm kind of coming from with this. I'm able to identify with this image more because the image represents the person first, and the disability second. And that's what I really love about it. I have a tactile art show that's coming up May 31st to June 6th at UBC in Vancouver.
Oh.
The whole show is with artists that are blind. And that is going to be a great experience for anyone who pops by at the Hatch Gallery on campus.
Okay.
The whole show is challenging people's perception of disability. It's meant to be able to be fully accessible. So I'll have my tactile pieces in the show. And it's going to be a show that blind people are definitely going to be encouraged to attend. The funny thing, when I've talked to groups of people that are actually blind and talk about my painting, I usually get two groups of people. You get the people that are so amazed that this is a thing,
right?
That they're like, give me something, I need to touch it. And then I get the other person, which is like generally a grumpy old man who's like, an art show? Why the hell would I go to that? I'm blind. And then I hand them one of my paintings and they run their hands over and they're like, oh my God. I can actually see it. And that's really rewarding for me to be able to hear those reactions from people. And yeah, just making a space that has been so exclusive and only welcoming to privileged people, essentially, the gallery scene, to now a welcoming place for any demographic.
That's awesome. Hey, definitely send us information on that show. I'll share it with the Vocali folks and hopefully get you some more people.
Yeah, and for sure,
Awesome.
maybe once it's a little bit closer, we'll have you on again, just to give it a good plug, because it sounds like an amazing show. So one more time, when is it and where is it?
May 31st to July 6th at the Hatch Gallery in Vancouver. It's on the UBC campus.
Well, hey, listen, thanks so much for taking some time out and talking to us. It was an absolute pleasure, and best of luck with the show.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me on. I really enjoy listening to the show now that I've discovered it, and I love the work that you guys are doing too. You're challenging people's perceptions of disability, just like me, and being able to educate the general population around disability, which is very, very, very needed.
Yes, yeah, it is. Well, thank you very much. All right. Take care, sir, and we'll talk to you again.
All right, cool.
Okay, Richard.
Have a great day.
Take care. Well, it's always interesting whenever we talk to somebody who is visually impaired that's doing a way more than I am.
Yep.
I mean, and we didn't even talk about the jiu-jitsu part.
Yep.
Guy's been taking jiu-jitsu for 4 years.
5, he said.
5 years.
Yeah. Get it right. He can kick your ass.
Yeah, clearly. But no, it's so great to hear. I mean, it's just, we need more of these stories to get out there, because it's so important for both the visually impaired community and able-bodied community to realize that that they shouldn't be limited on what other people tell them that they can do. Which is why it's so heartbreaking to hear that his doctor actually told him that.
Well, I even recall back when I had my accident, I think doctors have a blanket statement saying, you're not going to be able to do what you used to do, because they just don't understand. They're not educated either, right?
And I
Unless
guess
you've been touched by, somebody with a disability.
Yeah, so they should just shut up.
Yeah.
Maybe, I guess maybe, maybe there was a time where that was maybe kind of true, or maybe there
never really was.
They maybe they just think that, it's grounding them in a reality so that they don't.
Right.
Maybe they think they're doing the right thing by saying things like that. Preparing them for the worst.
Yeah.
Making sure that they're completely prepared for the huge change in lifestyle that needs to happen. But you know what? Telling them what they can or can't do, it's just
bad form.
It is.
If you did it under any other circumstances, it would be wrong, and it still is wrong.
Yeah.
You don't go to your kid and go, you failed your French test, so odds are you're never going to be able to learn a language.
Yeah, that's true.
You never approach life like that, and I don't know why a doctor would do that to somebody. It's just.
And you've heard multiple stories of not only doctors. I mean, you've had where teachers have told students, look, you shouldn't be pursuing that field because.
Yeah, I had a vision teacher try and tell me.
A vision teacher.
That I had to tell her student that student couldn't become a teacher. Like, what?
Why not?
One, why not? Two, why do you want me to tell this kid that? And three, what the hell are you thinking? You're a vision teacher. You're supposed to be encouraging this kid to, reach his potential. You don't set artificial barriers like that.
That's crazy.
Unfortunately, that teacher is still an active vision teacher.
Oh, is that right?
Shame on you, unnamed vision teacher.
Yep.
Shame. I really do like that new icon. The new.
Oh yeah.
It's so good.
Yeah, it's much more dynamic and it's a good symbol.
And the fact that it's getting a little bit of pushback because it doesn't include all disabilities, it's a little ridiculous. I mean, how what are you going to have an icon? How are you going to represent all disabilities with one icon?
Well, I think the correct answer to that is actually it does, because that guy in the wheelchair is also dyslexic. You just can't see it.
Well, we have to celebrate our little successes too, right? We're finally starting to get emojis symbolizing, a guy with a white cane, person in a wheelchair. We're in the 21st century now. Like, let's celebrate these successes and keep moving forward.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. Keep it positive. Look at Ryan injecting some positivity into the podcast. What's that?
Ryan, hang on. That's where the cowbell. There we go.
Good job, Ryan.
Thank you.
Oh.
I was saving that
He's been saving it since last week.
3 years ago.
I have a little nugget of positivity.
Mark it down on the calendar. That's his quota for the year.
That's right. Yep.
Hey, Ryan.
Yes, sir.
Where can people find us?
As usual, at atbanter.com.
They can also drop us an email at cowbell@atbanter.com. Steve almost missed that.
I almost did. Yeah, it was a little delayed there.
I saw the
You can
panic
take
look
that.
in
You
his
can
face.
take that delay out in post.
Monday, not enough coffee.
What else? Where else can people find us, people?
Oh, they can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Correct. All right. Well, I think that is going to about do it for us this week. Thanks, everybody, for listening in. And we'll see everybody next week.
Ciao.
This podcast has been brought to you by Canadian Assistive Technology, providing low vision and blindness solutions across Canada. Find us online at www.canasstech.com. That's CANASSTECH.com. Or call us toll free at 1-844-795-8324. For all your assistive technology servicing needs, call Chaos Technical Services at 778-847-6840 or find them online at chaostechnicalservices.com. Music provided by bensound.com.
Whoa, look at that. Master of the one take.